Good morning, Bucknutters. It is Thursday, July the 6th, 2023. I am Ruben. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and change. I apologize. We are coming to you a little bit late. The dean has already been paddled. We have taken care of that. I want to thank everybody, though, first and foremost, for the month of June, the Bucknuts podcast, Bucknuts Morning 5. Added more subscribers this past month than any other podcast in the 24/7 Sports Network. And you know what that means? We have to defend our title this month. I've heard a lot of smack talk by the Michigan and Georgia podcast teams that they're going to play us this month. Your responsibility as a good Bucknutter, you push pause and push subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can move on with us in glorious fashion. And we can build as we build our winning vibe back to the game when the guys will do it on the field for us for real. So, lots of recruiting to talk about. Got the two guys to do it. Mark Porter and Bill Kurelic are here. Gentlemen, Ohio State is looking at the clock and adjusting for West Coast time and thinking, or is Arizona on Mountain time? I don't know the answer to that, but I will say this. At 3 p.m. Eastern time today, Arizona defensive back Miles Lockhart will make his verbal commitment known to the people. Bill Kurelic, will Ohio State be adding to its class?
Well, first of all, Arizona right now, at least Chandler, Arizona, Miles Lockhart goes to Bassa High School, Chandler, Arizona, and he is announcing at 12 noon his time, which is 3 p.m. Eastern time today. And I have had him crystal ball to Ohio State since, I think February 12th, I think it was, when Blair Angulo and Blair is one of our West Coast guys at 247 Sports, got together to put that pick in, and I'm riding with the pick. I'm staying with him announcing for Ohio State. Ohio State was his only official visit, though he has approximately 24 scholarship offers, Oregon, and of course the Arizona schools, et cetera, et cetera. But 3 o'clock today, he makes his announcement.
Your thoughts on him as a prospect? He's not the defensive back that most have been discussing, given the fact the Bryce West is in and everyone's on Aaron Scott watch. I wonder how many people have alert set up with that name. How do you think he fits in as a prospect?
Well,
as you can see in the go ahead, bro.
Good. Well, I was just going to say Ohio State has recruited him as a nickel corner. Some schools have recruited him as an offensive player, a really good offensive player too. But he would fit in perfectly if things happen the way many people think they're going to happen. That is, Bryce West is an outside corner, and Aaron Scott, who will announce his decision on July 30th, is an outside corner, and they've recruited Miles Lockhart as an inside or nickel corner, so he would fit in perfectly. The other two guys that they certainly would love to add to get a fourth corner are Xavier Brown, who, by the way, announces on July 9th from California, and Kobe Black, who has not set an announcement date from Texas. Those guys are outside corners as well, so Miles Lockhart would fit in perfectly. So I'll let you go, Mark.
Yeah, Mark, as you can see in the background there.
Yeah, we kind of conveniently have him playing, so if you don't want to look at my face, you can peek at that. He has a great highlight film where it just keeps going, where if you're a guy like me and you're saying, hey, I want to put the top plays at the beginning, you have a lot to choose from. He's a real bursty type, quickness type guy where he makes a lot of plays on the ball at the last second. He's coming in and batting a lot of things down. What I really like about him is the way he, I want to say, almost shoots into the backfield or shoots and throws on ball carriers and takes their legs out. He's very aggressive throwing his head in there. I always love when I see a guy that throws his face in there as a tackler, especially a cornerback. He could be the slot corner, which means he's got a little safety in him because he'd have to take on some run responsibilities up there, but he's got that. But he is really a polished corner, and he's got all the speed and jitter and everything to stay with those inside guys. As I'm watching this tape for the second or third time, I'm really starting to see that burst and that dive to the ball where he does make a lot of plays. And yeah, they're at the last second, but a lot of guys aren't getting there even at the last second to make those plays. So that's the type of player he is.
I mean, Ohio State had identified him early on, probably a little bit earlier than the rest of the teams of their ilk. So we're very confident, or let's see, hopefully confident that he will join the fold this afternoon. All right, it's been the first time you guys have been on since the Chi-Town Shuffle, let's call it. Justin Scott joined, and I don't think many people had the defensive tackle from Chicago booked for the Bucknuts. And then Marquise Lightfoot opted for the Sun and Fun of the U at Miami, when we had already discussed him as almost being a guy who had his locker ready at Ohio State. So, Bill, if you can take us through what you think went on with each guy in terms of their decision and how it came down the stretch, and then you can offer up maybe some scouting vibes on the whole show.
Well, two interesting recruitments, no doubt. Justin Scott, the defensive tackle from Chicago. A lot of people had him going to either to Miami or Notre Dame. But as his recruitment went through, he made official visits as well to Michigan and Ohio State. And I had mentioned that I really felt that it was going to be, in the end, a Midwest battle. I thought Michigan, Ohio State, or Notre Dame. I felt it was going to be Michigan or Ohio State if he would make a decision sooner rather than later. But if he waited it out, Notre Dame really thought they were going to get him on campus for an official visit in September when Ohio State plays at Notre Dame. As it turns out, he didn't wait it out and ended up choosing between Ohio State and Michigan. And I thought it was going to be a Midwest battle, just didn't know which of the three. And when it came down to the end, to be honest, I wasn't sure which way he was going to go, Ohio State or Michigan. And I don't think anybody else was. If you would knew that either. If you looked at all the crystal balls or the other different systems out there, future, all that, nobody had him crystal balled or picked to Ohio State. So it was certainly a great addition for Ohio State. He let Ohio State know a day or two before, maybe 2 days before, that he was picking Ohio State, and it was able to be kept pretty much secret till he announced it. And certainly that was great news for Ohio State. Anytime you get a win over Michigan, as well as Notre Dame, that's big. On the other hand, Marcus Lightfoot, that was a very interesting story in its own light. I think virtually everyone on the opposite end of the spectrum had him picked to Ohio State. And I really believe that's where he was going to go. But a couple things happened. And, the NIL is always involved in these, and that happened. And the other thing is that, everyone pretty much now has Edric Houston picked to Ohio State at defensive end. Most people now are picking Dylan Stewart to Ohio State at defensive end. And I think that's something Miami could use. They could use the NIL, and they could use Ohio State getting other defensive ends in their recruitment of Marcus Lightfoot. Now, even with all that said, Marcus Lightfoot had pretty much decided on the morning of his announcement that he was going to Ohio State. However, there was some more thinking to do. As of that afternoon, it wasn't certain that that's what he was going to do. There was even a question mark as to whether he was going to end up announcing that day. But in the end, he talked things over with his coach, his family, everybody involved, and decided that he was going to stay with Miami. But that final news did not come out that he was going to go ahead and go with his announcement and make it until approximately an hour or so before his announcement. And he went ahead and made the announcement for Miami.
All right, Mark, if you can put all of this in context, you're a smarter man than me, but we discussed 4 dudes there, all on the defensive line. Put everyone in context. You've recently kind of broken down Dylan Stewart. You got some feelings on Edric Houston, etc. And we also have talked ad nauseum here about Marquise Lightfoot. And listen, I was a huge Marquise Lightfoot fan. I'm not going to lie. So I have faith in the staff that they'll be able to pull it off. But maybe put everything in context here, who you like the best, etc.
Yeah, if they played back our old podcast, we would not be able to deny how much we liked Lightfoot, and for good reason. Rudolph, I liked him also, and what we said, those are guys that are on the edge of the defense. You need to develop, add weight, and they're the pass rushers. Can't wait to see how those guys turn out. Hats off to them. Dylan Stewart, I like him just as much. Like I put on his film, and as you're watching it here, he plays linebacker in high school. And he's a really good athlete. He's got a lot of versatility. I don't know if Lightfoot and Rudolph could play the linebacker position the way he does. But because he's so big, he's going to be putting his hand down and playing defensive end. And he plays the 3-4 outside linebacker, which is like a defensive end on this tape. He's got the twitch, the burst. And a couple of times on film, offensive linemen aren't even touching him because he has the quickness and, the ability to run around with him. Or he's a little bit better of an athlete than those other guys are. So it's a different type of player. He's got a little more versatility than Rudolph and those guys, but like him just as much. I think at the end of the day, those guys are all top pass rushers. We always say this, Ohio State's always going to have another guy. When we look at Edric Houston, the defensive end, he's not as twitchy off the edge, but he's 250, 260 pounds. So he's the guy that, if there was a guy that had to slide inside sometimes or play a 5 technique and not truly that edge pass rush guy, he may grow out of that and be a defensive tackle, but he's doing damage from defensive end in high school. He's got that type of pass rush skill set out there. It just, we'll see how that translates when he goes against bigger bodies, and he's a bigger body himself. And of course, Justin Scott, the guy we got, he's a space eater in the middle. At 6'5" or whatever you're, 6'4", 315 pounds, you see him just eating up. I see him more as maybe a 1 technique in there where, if you're having trouble getting pushed off the ball, he's going to anchor the point of attack. He's going to have that big, long, wingspan in there. He absolutely dominates some offensive linemen to the point where I'm questioning the competition. He's blowing by these guys. So he can do some other things. I don't know if he's going to be a pass rusher in there as much as some of the other guys, but that might not be his job for what they need to anchor down the middle of that defense. And there's some offensive line clips on there where, the offensive line coaches may want to take a piece of him, or there's probably some guys that may have offered him as an offensive lineman because he is a guy that will pop you. And, when he's pulling a guard, he blows up some people. So, there's something to him in his size there. I hope I broke down all 4 of those guys kind of, so people, the layman can understand, what you're kind of getting and the differences. But big guy in the middle is Scott. And then now we're looking at Dylan Stewart as an edge guy. And then what was his name? Oh, Edric Houston, yep. The guy who's playing end now that has the versatility to play end or maybe go inside because of his size.
Let me interject real quick. Dan and Mark, we talked about JT Tuimoloau and how Mark and I stood next to Tuimoloau at one of Ohio State camps. Could not believe how big he is now. I mean, he is huge.
Now you
and
Mark,
now. Yeah, last week or 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago at camp, we were raving, Mark and I, and we talked about this on this podcast, how big Tuimoloau is right now. And Mark mentioned that Dylan Stewart is a linebacker in a big body. Well, I've seen those two side by side, Tuimoloau and Dylan Stewart. And Dylan Stewart is just as big or bigger looking than Tuimoloau. It's incredible how big Dylan Stewart is and looks. And again, as Mark said, he's a big guy, with linebacker ability. He's tremendous. What a tremendous prospect Dylan Stewart is. He's a 5-star, and he absolutely deserves it. And then the other guy that talked about, Mark, Justin Scott, if you look at pictures of him in a basketball uniform, he is not a big, sloppy, fat guy. Not at all. He looks great in a basketball uniform. So, those guys, Stewart and Justin Scott, you talk about the look test, you get an A+ for both of them on the look test.
Yeah, Justin Scott, if you read his deal, I think he would probably rather be on the hardwood, but 6'5", 305, dude, you're going to get run up and down the court at some point in the Big Ten. Let's take a quick break and pay a few podcast bills. All right, we discussed some of the current events. I want to go over if Ohio State's going to finish with the number one class, or at least a class that can stand in the ring with Georgia at the very, very top. They're going to need to have an anchor at every position. I think they've clearly done that. Wide receiver, if you use the top 247, or actually let's use the 247 composite, they've got two of the top six receivers. They've got their quarterback, Aaron Nolan, number 4. They've got 2 top 20 running backs. Offensive line, they need an anchor. A defensive line, we just discussed. They have an anchor there. They already got Justin Scott. Linebacker, they got 2 guys, but I think they need, I don't know about an anchor, but someone who can kind of headline the group. And then secondary, we will get to that as well. There'll be a very local vibe to that. But let's start with the offensive line, Bill. Brandon Baker, give us the latest. It seems like we have a lot of eggs in the Brandon Baker basket. Am I wrong?
Well, 2 baskets, I guess you could say. Brandon Baker and Gerby Lambert.
Okay.
But I do agree that of the 2, I like Ohio State's chances better with Baker. But Gerby Lambert is if anybody says they can really read that kid right now, I think, well, I don't believe them. His visits are Ohio State, Notre Dame, Boston College, and Harvard. That's not the usual foursome for a 5-star offensive lineman. He's an academic kid. He doesn't say much. He doesn't really like the recruiting process. As one person told me, he just could decide to stay close to home and go to Boston College. Notre Dame has a lot of confidence. Ohio State's been recruiting him. I don't think he's going to go to Harvard. I'll tell you that. But which of those 3 he's going to, I don't think anybody knows for sure right now. And we'll see. Brandon Baker, on the other hand, and our West Coast guy, Greg Biggins, who knows him really well, even mentioned this. I've been saying that if I had to pick right now, I would pick for Ohio State with Brandon Baker, and Greg Biggins saw him recently and talked to him recently, and he said the same thing. It kind of intimated that if he had to pick right now, he'd probably go with Ohio State for Brandon Baker. But we'll see. That one is still a very much a possibility for Ohio State, and either one of those guys would be a great anchor on the offensive line, but Baker, I think, is the better shot right now of the 2.
Mark, your thoughts on Baker quickly?
Yeah, I like Baker a lot. I think we should put a lot of eggs in his basket, and I hope we get him. He was the more polished version of the Armstrongs and some of the other guys we got, so I'm pretty high on him. That breakdown we did, everyone who saw it kind of jumped on the train real quick and said, yeah, with the feet he has at tackle and looking for a left tackle, he's the no-brainer at the left tackle right now in this class.
Okay, got Peyton Pierce and Garrett Stover at linebacker, but they're in the mix for Kingston Viliamu Asa. I saved you there, Bill.
That was really good.
Thank you. I practiced. I was up early.
Very good.
Fantastic prospect. Would really give them, those 3 in one class, that would give you 3 really good linebackers in one class, some versatility, really tough kids. That's obviously what you want out of your linebacker. Your thoughts on KVA?
Somewhat similar to Baker. If I had to pick right now, I'd go with Ohio State, Notre Dame, and USC. Still, you can legitimately find confidence in all 3 camps that they're going to get that young man. And he's a great one. I think Ohio State's got a couple things going for them. First of all, he knows how bad they want him. He was the very first kid in the entire 2024 class that Ohio State offered. They have wanted him at the top of the chart, top of the board from day one. Had a great visit, has a great relationship with both James Laurinaitis and Jim Knowles. He knows the playing time will be there. Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons he could pick Ohio State. But USC is working that one really hard. I still think it's going to come down to staying close to home and USC. And there's some family that would like to see him stay close to home. And that's, that's not surprising. But in the end, it's going to be Kingston's decision, and we'll see what he makes. And by the way, Edwin Spillman's still on the board. He hasn't committed to Tennessee yet, even though the crystal balls are for Tennessee. He hasn't committed there yet. So, he is still on the board too.
Mark, your thoughts on KVA? I know you just took a good look at him.
Yeah, he's playing on the screen behind me. I really like the Pierce kid. I like when he plays running back in high school, and you see what a great athlete he is running with the ball and the kind of burst and speed he has. I think he's your true Mike. And, of course, I like Stover. I think he's the versatile guy that's got some strong safety in him, maybe some linebacker down the road. But Kingston's my favorite. You turn on the tape, and you see a dog at linebacker. You see a guy that's bursting to the ball, sticking his nose on people, some of those knockdown tackles, not drag down tackles. He's all over the field. You can tell he's a great athlete. I didn't know he was the first guy that Ohio State offered in this class, but it makes sense that he was that easy of an evaluation where right when you turn off the film, you say, call him and offer him. It's not one of those things like, we need to maybe watch him or talk to his coach and see if everything I wanted was on film. He could even be a bad human being, and I like him. That's how good he is. So
That sounds like me.
Yeah. So that gives you an indication where it was one of those things where, I don't care. The tape was everything I need. Just take him, and I hope he's a good Saint when he gets here.
He's got the best name. I mean, his nickname's got to be the King or King something. And also, your parents name you Kingston. That's some pressure right there. So we know he's been able to deal with that quite well. All right. Lots of questions here from there's a few people that must have had cups of coffee this morning, and we will get as many questions to and some of this week I hope we covered. This one comes up all the time. Mika Hanna was on fire today. Does missing out on Marquise Lightfoot mean we offer an in-state prospect like Brian Robinson, or do we push harder for Booker Pickett Jr. out of Florida? William?
Well, the simple answer right now is no, because they haven't offered Brian Robinson yet. Lightfoot committed to Miami a few days ago, and there hasn't been an offer yet to Brian Robinson. So could that happen down the road? We'll see. But right now, the answer would be no, they haven't done it yet. And keep in mind, if they get Edric Houston and Dylan Stewart, while we wouldn't have all three necessarily, 2 5-star defensive ends and a 5-star defensive tackle in the class, that ain't bad. So, and then Booker Picker is still out there. He has continued to steadfastly tell me he's going to make an official visit to Ohio State during the season.
Mark, do you think there's another guy in the class that they honestly will offer at defensive end if they don't get these guys, or do you think they'll just move on to the next class?
I think in Ohio, there's 2 names you would look at. Maybe Dominique Kirks out of Villa Angela St. Joseph, if the list got farther down than Brian Robinson. And I like Elijah King out of Gahanna Lincoln. I'm not sure if his grades were there yet, but if his grades were there, he has the length and he'd be a late riser. I mean, those are, if you're asking me, the outside shots. Brian Robinson was at the Ohio State camp with no offer and rubbing elbows. So that's always out there. If you went to defensive tackle, maybe Ted Hammond went to Michigan, and Francis Brew out of Thomas Worthington, I think, is headed over to Pitt. Those were a couple of the top defensive linemen in Ohio. Would they try to get those guys uncommitted if they need another defensive lineman? I'm spitballing because of the question here, but yeah, I don't know if there's a guy in Ohio. Demetrius John's a great-looking defensive tackle who transferred from Westerville North to Dublin Kaufman. He was really impressive, so those are the top names. If, that's kind of what you're looking for as through that question. I think Booker Pickett would be the first natural, like, hey, let's try to get him. And then after that, maybe go in state because those guys a little better and see which one you can get the pop. But I think they'll be fine get out of state.
I guess it's possible someone could have an incredible senior year too, but I get the feeling they're pretty much set there with their wants. Bill, you answer this one if you want, or I can take it. What's the rule with crystal balls? I feel like your predictions should not be able to change minutes before commitment, and it not counts against you in your predictions. For example, Lightfoot. You're talking to, I don't do the crystal ball. I don't have that kind of juice. You're talking to Bill Kurelic, who's about the most conservative crystal baller we have. So I tend to agree with you there, Bill. I'm not going to make you answer that. You probably shouldn't change your thing down the stretch. Go ahead.
I will say a couple things there. When they first started the crystal ball, the idea was that the sooner you got it in, the more points or whatever you got. And if you changed a pick, you got dinged for that. You know,
where those ideas came from.
Yeah,
go ahead.
You got dinged for it if you changed it. And when the crystal ball picks started, you know, I had the philosophy somewhat because of those things, is that I wanted to make one pick and keep it there unless a very rare situation came up. And that's pretty much the way I've done it all along. If you look at my picks, I almost never change a pick. Very rarely. You know, there is the philosophy that you go with the leader, and then if things change, you change your pick, and that's fine. But my philosophy is I'm going to get one pick and I'm going to keep it there unless, again, something comes up that at the last minute. And I will say that in the case of Lightfoot, something did come up in the last minute. You know, there was a possibility that he was not going to announce his decision that day when he did, because he was thinking about things. You know, things changed late on that one. But again, you know, I don't change picks. I think my percentage of picks changed would be probably as low or lower than anybody in the entire network. I just don't do it very often. In that case, with Lightfoot, some people were posting on the board, well, none of the picks are changed, so he's going to Ohio State. So you have, you know, do you want to go ahead and change your pick and kind of let people know, or do you want not to? And that was a little bit of the thinking too there, is that, you know, I didn't want necessarily people to all think that he was definitely going to Ohio State when I knew about an hour beforehand that the pick was not going to be to Ohio State.
All right, crystal ball rules, man. People are really fired up about that. I don't dispute that. I think I agree with everyone. You shouldn't be able to change the last 7 and not have it affect your percentage. I will still stand by the way I do it. I wait for the dean and the Fong to roll their crystal balls, and then I go to sleep. Now, that very rarely wakes me up, and these guys ruined my Marquise Lightfoot slumber. But it worked out. And Brian Robinson questions, more Brian Robinson questions. Here we go. Secondary talk. Last guy. We'll end with this. Bill, do you think Aaron Scott is a lock to Ohio State?
I will say no, because I never use and I do not like the term lock. To me, there is no such thing as a lock commitment. You can always change a commitment. You can change it today. You can change it tomorrow. You can change it the morning of National Signing Day. To me, the lock comes in when you sign a letter of intent, and I'm not even sure that's a lock anymore. So I never have. I've done this 36 years, and I've never liked the term lock. So I'm not going to say that he's a lock, because I never say anybody's a lock.
So he's a mortal lock.
Mark, you felt for a while, though, that Scott was going to be a Buckeye, and that, you know, West and Scott would make up arguably the best in-state combo we've had in a long time, don't you think?
Yeah, corner, there's no question. And I think the longer this goes, the more indecision that was in the kid's head. You know, a lot of times when these kids know Bill and I have talked to a lot of kids who they're tired of the process. They're tired of the whining and dining, if that's possible, and they kind of want to get it over with. But when it gets strung out, they're going back and forth. And boy, I hate to say it, this bag of money we keep talking about is just, I think it weighs heavy on these kids. The decision isn't clear cut anymore. Like, hey, best facilities, best coaches, best record, best schedule. Okay, it's here. Now that stuff doesn't seem like it's the same gravitational pull that it used to be. So it makes you worry in cases like this. Why is it taking longer? And, and talking to my friends in Michigan, and, they've done a good job recruiting them. I mean, and they've been confident at times. I mean, very confident, but so is Ohio State. And I think just knowing the nature of any visit, the Bill said it last week, the high of the visit sometimes has to wear off, to get back down to normal altitude. And I think I've talked to these guys after these visits, and they're like, it's a mortal lock. He's coming to Michigan. They love it here. We love him. And, that's a tough process, and I don't know where this is going to end up. But yeah, I'd be scared if I had a crystal ball in somewhere.
But I want to make sure nobody thinks that when I say he's not a lock or whatever, that doesn't mean I'm wavering on my thoughts. I still think I still like Ohio State for Aaron Scott. I have for a long time. I put that pick in so long ago. I think I might have put it in with a chisel on a tablet. I picked that pick in that long ago, but I still like that pick, and I still think that Aaron Scott is going to Ohio State, but don't like the term lock.
Okay, Bill, let's finish with this. This is going to be the last word. What do you make of the front row theory that because Aaron Scott announcing his decision on his father's birthday, and his father is a publicly smart individual that roots for the Ohio State Buckeyes, that he would never pull the rug out from Pops? Your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are, let's wait and see what Aaron Scott announces. And again, like I said, I continue to like Ohio State there, but I don't put a whole lot of significance in all that stuff. It's what he decided to do. That's when he wants to make this announcement, and that's what he'll do. And the bad thing is for Ohio State and Michigan fans, that means you got to wait. Let's see, today is the 6th. That means you got to wait 24 more days.
I can't imagine a son and a father not knowing where he's going before he tells you on your birthday. I mean, you've had the car rides back and forth. You've had the dinners. Like, where your son's going. I doubt it's going to be a surprise to him on his birthday. But I love the reading of the tea leaves to say, wow, wouldn't you make your dad upset on his birthday if you picked his rival team? I don't know. That's some good homework there, Mr. Rubin.
Believe me, it didn't come from me. These Bucknutters get that kind of information. If he was coming from a different area, they'd be on his flight pattern. So we all know how that works. We appreciate these guys stopping by. Hope we got to all of your questions. If I interrupted too many times, I apologize. Once again, we need you to be a subscriber here to the podcast. We even got some comments on here about other podcasts to get more subscribers. That hurts our feelings. You can fix that by subscribing. Have a good one, Buck.